The moment their eyes met across that cluttered hotel lobby, Sarah knew something had shifted in her universe. But it wasn't until he spoke those simple words, "That's all we need," that she felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. If you've ever believed that love finds us in the most unexpected moments, this story might just restore your faith in second chances. Like, subscribe, and join me on this journey of how one single father's quiet dignity changed everything for a woman who'd forgotten how to trust. The rain pounded against the windows of the Grand Summit Hotel with unrelenting fury. It was the kind of storm that made Sarah Winters question why she'd ever agreed to manage this place. 3 years as the hotel's general manager had taught her to anticipate problems, but nothing could have prepared her for the chaos of this particular Friday evening. "I'm sorry, Ms. Winters, but the system is showing we're overbooked by 7 rooms," Megan, the front desk associate, whispered urgently. The young woman's eyes were wide with panic as she gestured to the growing line of weary travelers, all seeking shelter from the storm that had grounded flights and flooded highways across the region. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. The hotel was hosting a major pharmaceutical conference, and every available room within a 20-mile radius had been booked for weeks. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a potential disaster for the hotel's reputation. "How did this happen?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice low and controlled despite the anxiety coursing through her veins. "The system glitch from last week. It looks like some of the reservations we thought were cancelled actually weren't," Megan explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard in a desperate attempt to find a solution. Sarah nodded, her mind racing through possible solutions. She'd have to call neighboring hotels, arrange transportation, offer compensation packages. The logistics were daunting, but she'd handled worse. At 35, Sarah had built her career on solving problems that others deemed impossible. "I'll handle this," she told Megan, straightening her charcoal blazer and plastering on her most professional smile. "Continue checking in the confirmed reservations while I make some calls." The next hour passed in a blur of apologetic conversations and hastily arranged accommodations. Sarah had managed to find alternative lodging for 5 of the 7 overbooked guests, offering generous compensation packages that seemed to soothe most of their frustration. But as the lobby slowly emptied, she found herself facing the final 2 parties without a solution in sight. One was a boisterous group of sales executives who had already made their displeasure known, loudly demanding to speak with someone who could actually solve problems. The other was a tall man standing quietly at the edge of the lobby, his hand resting protectively on the shoulder of a young girl who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Unlike the executives, they hadn't approached the desk to complain. Instead, the man seemed to be patiently waiting, occasionally bending down to whisper something to the child that made her giggle despite her obvious exhaustion. Sarah found her eyes drawn to them repeatedly as she worked the phones. There was something about the man's calm demeanor that stood in stark contrast to the chaos around him. His dark hair was slightly damp from the rain, and his simple button-down shirt and jeans suggested he hadn't been traveling for business. The little girl clutched a worn stuffed rabbit, her eyes heavy with sleep as she leaned against her father's side. When the last available room at the airport hotel was secured for the sales executives, who departed with reluctant grumbles about inconvenience, Sarah finally approached the man and his daughter. Up close, she noticed the fine lines around his eyes, not from age, but from what looked like years of both laughter and worry. "I'm so sorry for the wait," she began, her professional tone masking her exhaustion. "I'm Sarah Winters, the general manager. I understand you had a reservation with us tonight?" The man nodded, offering a tired smile that somehow reached his eyes. "Daniel Carter," he said, extending his hand. "And this is my daughter, Lily." The little girl looked up at the mention of her name, offering a shy wave before tucking herself closer to her father's side. "We've had an unfortunate overbooking situation," Sarah explained, feeling a fresh wave of guilt as she noticed the dark circles under Daniel's eyes. "I've been arranging alternative accommodations for affected guests, but I'm afraid we've exhausted all nearby options due to the storm." She paused, dreading the reaction her next words might provoke. "There's only 1 room left in our hotel," she whispered, conscious of Lily's attentive gaze. "It's our maintenance suite. It's clean but basic, just a small bedroom with a queen bed and a bathroom. It's where our maintenance staff occasionally rest during long shifts. I can offer it to you at no charge, along with meal vouchers for your inconvenience, but I completely understand if you'd prefer that I continue searching for more suitable accommodations elsewhere." Sarah braced herself for disappointment, anger, or demands for compensation. What she didn't expect was the gentle smile that spread across Daniel's face. "That's all we need," he said simply, giving Lily's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "We're just grateful to have a dry place to sleep. Isn't that right, Lil?" The little girl nodded earnestly. "Plus, Hoppy doesn't take up much space," she added, holding up her stuffed rabbit with solemn importance. Something caught in Sarah's throat, a feeling she couldn't immediately identify. In her years of hotel management, she'd become accustomed to entitlement, to guests who viewed any inconvenience as a personal affront. Daniel's gracious acceptance caught her off guard, making her suddenly aware of how rarely she encountered genuine kindness in her position. That's very understanding of you," she managed, feeling strangely flustered under his steady gaze. "Let me get your key cards ready and show you to the room personally." As Sarah processed their information, she learned that Daniel and Lily had been traveling to visit Lily's grandmother, who lived in a small town about 30 miles north. Their connecting flight had been cancelled due to the storm, leaving them stranded until morning. "Daddy's really good at adventures," Lily informed Sarah seriously as they waited for the elevator. "He says the best stories come from when things don't go as planned." Daniel chuckled, running a hand through his hair with a hint of embarrassment. "A philosophy born of necessity when you're raising a curious kid on your own," he explained. "We've had plenty of practice turning mishaps into memories." The maintenance suite was located on the hotel's top floor, accessed through a service corridor that Sarah rarely visited. As she unlocked the door, she found herself apologizing again for the simplicity of the accommodations. "It's really not what we'd normally offer guests," she said, flicking on the lights to reveal a modest room with plain furnishings. Though clean and well-maintained, it lacked the polished aesthetic of the hotel's regular rooms. But Lily's eyes widened with delight as she bounded into the space. "Look, Daddy! We can see the whole city from here," she exclaimed, pressing her nose against the window where the storm's lightning illuminated the skyline in dramatic flashes. Daniel set down their small overnight bag and joined his daughter at the window. "You're right, Lil. Best view in the house." He turned to Sarah with that same genuine smile that had caught her off guard earlier. "This is perfect, Ms. Winters. Thank you for finding a solution that keeps us out of the storm." "Please, call me Sarah," she found herself saying, the formality she usually maintained with guests suddenly feeling unnecessary. "And it's the least I could do, considering the circumstances. The hotel restaurant is still open for another hour if you're hungry, and room service is available until midnight." "Actually," Daniel said, glancing at Lily who was now bouncing experimentally on the edge of the bed, "we haven't had dinner yet. Would you perhaps know which menu items might be best for a picky 8-year-old? The question was so ordinary, so parental, that Sarah felt something shift inside her. In that moment, Daniel wasn't just another guest to be managed, he was a father trying to make the best of a difficult situation for his daughter. "The kitchen makes excellent grilled cheese sandwiches that aren't on the menu," she heard herself saying. "With tomato soup on the side. It's what I order when I'm working late." Daniel's face brightened. "That sounds perfect. Lily's a grilled cheese connoisseur, aren't you, Lil?" The little girl nodded enthusiastically. "With the crusts cut off," she specified, making both adults laugh. "I can arrange that," Sarah promised. "In fact, why don't I call it in for you now? My treat, a proper welcome despite our rocky start." Before Daniel could protest, Sarah had stepped into the hallway to make the call. As she spoke with the kitchen, she found herself adding a chocolate milkshake for Lily and asking if they could arrange for the meal to be served with a little extra care. The staff, familiar with Sarah's usual efficiency and professionalism, seemed surprised by these personal touches, but readily agreed. When she returned to the room, Lily had already changed into pajamas decorated with stars and was carefully arranging her stuffed rabbit on one of the pillows. Daniel was hanging their damp jackets in the small closet, the domestic normalcy of the scene striking Sarah as both ordinary and somehow profound. "Dinner will be up in about 20 minutes, she informed them. "I should let you get settled." "Thank you again," Daniel said, walking her to the door. In the narrow space of the doorway, Sarah became acutely aware of his height, the warmth of his presence, the faint scent of rain still clinging to his clothes. Not just for the room, but for making this feel less like a disaster and more like an adventure for Lily. "It's nothing," Sarah insisted, suddenly self-conscious. "Just doing my job." Daniel shook his head slightly. "No, you're going above and beyond. I recognize the difference." Their eyes met for a moment longer than was strictly professional, and Sarah felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in years. Clearing her throat, she took a step back into the hallway. "If you need anything at all, just dial 0 on the room phone. I'll be here until midnight, and then the night manager can assist you." With a final smile, she turned and walked briskly toward the elevator, trying to ignore the strange lightness in her chest. It was just gratitude from a satisfied guest, she told herself. Nothing more. But as she rode the elevator back to the lobby, Sarah found herself thinking about Daniel's gentle patience, the way he transformed what could have been a stressful situation into an adventure for his daughter. In her 3 years as general manager, she'd interacted with thousands of guests, but few had left such an immediate impression. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of routine tasks. Sarah checked on the sales executives who had been relocated, confirmed arrangements for the morning shuttle service, and reviewed the next day's arrivals to ensure there would be no repeat of tonight's overbooking disaster. Yet throughout it all, her thoughts kept drifting back to the maintenance suite and its unexpected occupants. At 11:30 p.m., as she was preparing to hand over to the night manager, her phone rang. It was the front desk. "Ms. Winters, I have Mr. Carter on line 1, the night clerk informed her. "He's asking if we have any children's medicine available. His daughter has developed a fever." Sarah felt a spike of concern. "Put him through," she said, already reaching for her purse where she kept a small emergency kit. "Sarah?" Daniel's voice came through the line, the worry evident despite his calm tone. "I'm sorry to bother you so late, but Lily's running a temperature. I think it's just from the stress of travel and getting caught in the rain, but I didn't pack any children's fever reducer. Is there any chance the hotel has something, or is there a pharmacy nearby that might still be open?" "All the nearby pharmacies would be closed by now," Sarah replied, making a quick decision. "But I have children's Tylenol in my emergency kit. I'll bring it up right away." Before Daniel could respond, she had hung up and was already heading for the service elevator, her manager's composure momentarily forgotten in her concern for the little girl who had so cheerfully accepted their makeshift accommodations. When Daniel opened the door to the maintenance suite, the worry on his face was evident. He'd changed into a faded t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair slightly mussed as though he'd been running his hands through it anxiously. "Thank you for coming so quickly," he said, stepping aside to let her enter. "Her temperature isn't dangerously high, but she's uncomfortable and having trouble sleeping." Lily was curled up in the center of the bed, her cheeks flushed and her stuffed rabbit clutched tightly to her chest. She offered Sarah a weak smile that tugged at something deep in Sarah's chest. "Hey there," Sarah said softly, approaching the bed. "I heard you're not feeling too well." Lily shook her head, her lower lip trembling slightly. "My throat hurts, and I'm all hot and cold at the same time." Sarah sat gently on the edge of the bed and placed the back of her hand against Lily's forehead, a gesture she remembered from her own childhood when her mother would check for fever. "You are a bit warm," she confirmed. "But I've brought something that should help you feel better." As Sarah measured out the correct dose of medicine, she found herself slipping into a nurturing role that felt both foreign and strangely familiar. Her own life had been so focused on her career that moments like these, caring for a sick child, offering comfort, were outside her usual experience. "This tastes like cherries," she promised as she handed Lily the small cup of medicine. "And it will help bring down your fever so you can sleep better." Lily eyed the medicine dubiously but took it without complaint after a reassuring nod from her father. "Thank you," she said solemnly after swallowing the liquid. "Daddy says it's important to say thank you when people help you." "Your daddy is very wise," Sarah replied, smiling at Daniel over Lily's head. The tender concern on his face as he watched his daughter made something twist inside Sarah's chest, a recognition of the depth of love that existed between this father and his child. "Is there anything else you need?" Sarah asked, standing up from the bed. "I could have some tea sent up, or extra blankets." "Could you?" Lily began hesitantly, then stopped, looking to her father for permission. "What is it, Lil?" Daniel encouraged gently. "Could you tell me a story?" the little girl asked, her eyes wide and hopeful despite her discomfort. "Daddy always tells me stories when I don't feel good, but he's already told all the ones he knows tonight." Sarah blinked in surprise. It had been years since anyone had asked her for a story. Her nieces and nephews lived across the country, and her own life had become so consumed by spreadsheets and occupancy rates that storytelling seemed like a distant skill from another lifetime. I'm not sure I remember any good ones," she admitted, looking to Daniel for help. But he just smiled encouragingly. "I bet you know at least one," he said. "And Lily's an excellent audience, even when she's under the weather." Something about the warmth in his eyes made it impossible for Sarah to refuse. She sat back down on the edge of the bed, trying to recall the stories her own mother had told her when she was Lily's age. "Once upon a time," she began hesitantly, "there was a little star who lived in the night sky. Unlike all the other stars who were content to stay in their places and twinkle gently, this little star was curious about the world below." The story flowed more easily than Sarah had expected, a tale about a brave little star who ventured down to Earth and discovered that even small lights can make a big difference in the darkness. As she spoke, Lily's eyes grew heavy, the medicine beginning to take effect. By the time the little star returned to its place in the sky, wiser for its adventures, Lily was fast asleep, her breathing deep and even. "That was beautiful," Daniel said softly as they stepped away from the bed. "You have a natural way with her." Sarah felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "I used to tell stories to my younger siblings when we were kids," she admitted. "I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed it." They stood in the dim light of the room's small lamp, the sleeping child creating a strange bubble of intimacy around them. For a moment, Sarah forgot that she was the hotel manager and Daniel was a guest. They were just two people, sharing a quiet moment of connection in the midst of an unexpected situation. "I should let you get some rest," she said finally, reluctant to break the spell but aware of the late hour. "The medicine should help her sleep through the night, but if her fever returns or you need anything else, please don't hesitate to call." Daniel walked her to the door, pausing before opening it. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, his voice low and sincere. "Not just for the medicine or the story, but for making what could have been a miserable night into something kind of special." Their eyes met, and Sarah felt that same flutter in her chest, stronger now. "You're welcome," she. Their eyes met, and Sarah felt that same flutter in her chest, stronger now. "You're welcome," she replied softly. "Try to get some rest." As she made her way back to her office, Sarah found herself replaying the evening's events in her mind. There was something about Daniel Carter that had broken through the professional distance she typically maintained, something in his quiet strength and the gentle way he cared for his daughter that resonated with her in unexpected ways. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having passed during the night. Sarah arrived at the hotel earlier than usual, telling herself it was to ensure the day's operations ran smoothly after the previous evening's chaos. But she couldn't deny the small thrill of anticipation she felt when she spotted Daniel and Lily in the hotel restaurant, sharing breakfast at a corner table. Lily spotted her first, waving enthusiastically with a piece of toast still clutched in her hand. "Sarah! I'm all better," she called out, earning amused glances from nearby diners. Sarah made her way to their table, pleased to see the healthy color had returned to Lily's cheeks. "Good morning," she greeted them. "I'm glad to see you're feeling better, Lily." "The magic medicine worked," Lily declared solemnly. "And Daddy says it's because you told me such a good story that the germs got bored and left." Daniel chuckled, meeting Sarah's eyes with a warmth that made her pulse quicken. "I may have embellished the medical science a bit," he admitted. "But the story definitely helped." "Would you like to join us?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair at their table. "Unless you're busy with work, of course." Sarah hesitated only briefly before sitting down. "I can spare a few minutes," she said, though her morning schedule was already packed with meetings. Those few minutes stretched into half an hour as Lily enthusiastically recounted her dreams about the little star from Sarah's story, and Daniel explained their plans to rent a car and continue their journey to Lily's grandmother's house once breakfast was finished. "She's turning 80 next week," Daniel explained. "We try to visit a few times a year, but this birthday is special. Lily's been planning the celebration for months. I made a scrapbook with pictures of Grandma from when she was little all the way until now," Lily added proudly. "And we're going to bake her favorite cake, lemon with raspberry filling." "That sounds wonderful," Sarah said, finding herself genuinely interested in their plans. "Your grandmother is lucky to have such thoughtful family members." A comfortable silence fell over the table, broken only when Sarah's phone buzzed with a reminder about her upcoming staff meeting. "I should get to work," she said reluctantly, rising from her chair. "Of course," Daniel nodded, standing as well. "We should be heading out soon anyway. The rental car company said they'd have a vehicle ready by 9. Sarah hesitated, suddenly aware that once Daniel and Lily checked out, she would likely never see them again. The thought left an unexpected hollow feeling in her chest. "I'll make sure your bill is processed properly," she said, falling back on professionalism to mask her disappointment. "Given the circumstances, we'll only charge you for the meals, not for the room." "That's very generous," Daniel replied. "But unnecessary. You turned what could have been a disaster into an adventure for us." "Still, I insist," Sarah said firmly. "It's hotel policy for situations like this." As she turned to leave, Lily's voice stopped her. "Will you be here when we come back through on Sunday?" the little girl asked hopefully. "We're only staying at Grandma's for 3 days." Sarah glanced at Daniel, who looked slightly embarrassed by his daughter's directness. "Lily, Ms. Winters is very busy running the hotel. She won't have time to." "Actually," Sarah interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness, "I will be here. Sunday is my day off, but I live nearby." She hesitated, then added, "Perhaps we could meet for ice cream if you have time before your flight?" The smile that spread across Daniel's face made her heart skip a beat. "We'd like that," he said simply. "Our flight isn't until 7 in the evening." They exchanged phone numbers under the pretense of coordinating about the rental car, and Sarah found herself walking to her meeting with a lightness in her step that had been absent for longer than she cared to admit. The next 3 days passed in a blur of routine hotel management, but Sarah's thoughts frequently drifted to Daniel and Lily. She found herself wondering how their visit with Lily's grandmother was going, if the birthday celebration was everything Lily had hoped it would plan. Once or twice, she caught herself smiling at her phone when a text message arrived with a photo of Lily and an elegant elderly woman blowing out candles on a homemade cake, or Daniel and Lily standing beside a small lake, their faces alight with laughter. By Sunday afternoon, as Sarah waited at the small ice cream parlor 2 blocks from the hotel, she had to admit to herself that what she was feeling went beyond professional concern for guests who had experienced an inconvenience. There was something about Daniel Carter, his patience, his kindness, the way he'd built his life around making his daughter feel secure and loved, that had awakened something in Sarah she'd thought long dormant. When they arrived, Lily ran to her with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of childhood, launching into a detailed account of their weekend adventures before they'd even ordered their ice cream. Daniel followed at a more measured pace, his eyes crinkling with amusement as he watched his daughter's animated retelling. "She's been talking about seeing you again all morning," he confided quietly as they stood in line. "I hope that's not too much pressure." Sarah shook her head, surprised by how touched she felt. "Not at all. I've been looking forward to it too." The afternoon passed with remarkable ease, the three of them strolling through the small park adjacent to the ice cream parlor, Lily running ahead to feed the ducks while Sarah and Daniel walked side by side, their conversation flowing naturally from topic to topic. Sarah learned that Daniel was an architectural engineer who had shifted to freelance work after his wife's death 4 years ago, allowing him more flexibility to be present for Lily. "It hasn't always been easy," he admitted as they watched Lily attempting to coax a particularly stubborn duck closer to the shore. "But we've found our rhythm. Lily's an amazing kid, resilient in ways I never expected." "She clearly adores you," Sarah observed. "The way you handled the hotel situation, turning it into an adventure instead of a disappointment, that's a gift, Daniel. Not every parent would have managed it so gracefully." He shrugged, a hint of color touching his cheeks at the compliment. "You learn to adapt. And speaking of adaptability, I was impressed by how you handled the overbooking crisis. Most hotel managers I've encountered would have been far less personally involved in finding solutions. Most hotel situations don't involve guests as understanding as you were," Sarah countered with a smile. "You made my job easier by not being difficult." "Is that why you offered us ice cream today?" Daniel asked, his tone light but his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Professional gratitude?" Sarah hesitated, aware that her answer mattered more than it should for two people who had known each other less than a week. "No," she said finally, deciding on honesty. "That's not why." Before Daniel could respond, Lily came running back, demanding they watch as she demonstrated her newly perfected cartwheel on the grassy area nearby. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities that neither had expected when they'd met in that chaotic hotel lobby. As the afternoon waned and the time for Daniel and Lily's departure approached, Sarah felt an increasing reluctance to say goodbye. They walked slowly back toward the hotel where Daniel had arranged for a taxi to take them to the airport, Lily skipping ahead and then doubling back, her energy seemingly inexhaustible despite the full weekend. "So," Daniel said as they paused outside the hotel entrance, "I was thinking." "Yes?" Sarah prompted when he hesitated. "Lily and I come back to visit her grandmother every few months," he continued, his usual confidence momentarily replaced by uncertainty. "And I was wondering if maybe next time, you might be interested in having dinner? Just the two of us?" The question hung between them, filled with potential. Sarah thought about her carefully structured life, the walls she'd built around herself after her last relationship had ended painfully 3 years ago. She thought about how easily Daniel and Lily had slipped past those defenses in just a few days. "I'd like that," she said simply, her heart racing despite the calmness of her voice. The smile that spread across Daniel's face made any lingering doubts vanish. "Good," he said softly. That's really good." Lily bounded back to them, oblivious to the moment she'd interrupted. "Is it time to go to the airport now?" she asked, her earlier enthusiasm dampened by the reality of departure. "Almost, Lil," Daniel confirmed, checking his watch. "The taxi should be here in about 10 minutes. Lily turned to Sarah, her expression suddenly serious. "Will you still be here when we come back next time?" she asked, the question echoing her concern from days earlier. Sarah knelt down to meet Lily's eyes. "Yes," she promised. "I'll be here. And maybe by then I'll have a new story to tell you about that little star." Lily's face brightened. "The one who was brave enough to explore the world?" "That's the one," Sarah nodded, feeling Daniel's gaze warm upon them both. When the taxi arrived, the goodbye was brief but laden with unspoken anticipation. Lily hugged Sarah fiercely, extracting a pinky promise about the continuation of the star story. Daniel's embrace was more restrained but no less meaningful, his hand lingering on Sarah's arm as they pulled apart. "I'll call you," he said, the simple phrase carrying the weight of future possibilities. "I'll answer," Sarah replied with a smile. As she watched the taxi pull away, Lily waving enthusiastically through the back window, Sarah felt a sense of openness she hadn't experienced in years. What had begun as a routine hotel crisis had somehow evolved into something unexpected and precious, a reminder that sometimes life's most beautiful moments arise from its most challenging circumstances. 6 months later, as Sarah prepared for Daniel and Lily's fourth visit since that stormy night, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. The long-distance relationship that had blossomed between her and Daniel had brought a richness to her days that she hadn't realized was missing. Their nightly phone calls, the weekend visits whenever possible, the growing bond she shared with Lily, all of it had transformed her once solitary existence into something vibrant and connected. Tonight, as they shared dinner at her apartment for the first time, Sarah had a surprise planned. After weeks of discussion and careful consideration, she had decided to accept a position as regional manager for the hotel chain, a role that would allow her to relocate to Daniel and Lily's hometown. It was a big step, one that both excited and terrified her. But as she set the table and checked on the lasagna baking in the oven, Lily's favorite, Sarah felt a certainty that had been absent from her life for too long. Sometimes the heart recognizes what it needs long before the mind catches up. When the doorbell rang, Sarah took a deep breath and moved to answer it, knowing that on the other side stood the future she never expected but now couldn't imagine living without. A future that had begun with a whispered apology about a single room left in a storm-battered hotel, and a gentle answer that had changed everything. "That's all we need," Daniel had said that night, not knowing how prophetic those words would prove to be. All they had needed was that one room, that one chance encounter, to set in motion a love story that none of them had seen coming, but that all of them now treasured beyond measure.